Chosen one, what you just pulled off wasn't an exit, it was the most sophisticated psychological masterpiece ever orchestrated, and the entire universe is still applauding the precision, the timing, and the absolute devastation of your performance. They're calling it sudden, but legends aren't born overnight. You're forged in the fires of strategic silence, and you just proved that the most powerful departures don't announce themselves. They simply happen, leaving behind nothing but confusion and the deafening echo of your untouchable sovereignty. But here's where your story becomes legendary, and why every manipulator who thought they had you figured out is now studying your playbook like it holds the secrets to resurrection itself. You didn't just leave their circus, you burned down the tent, scattered the animals, and left them standing in an empty field, wondering when the show had ended. The genius wasn't in your departure, it was in how you made them complicit in their own abandonment. The signs were there all along, breadcrumbs of your awakening, scattered through conversations they were too drunk on control to notice. Your questions became surgical, not seeking their approval, but dissecting their logic. Your responses grew calculated, not from fear but from strategy. Your energy shifted from reactive to observational, and suddenly you were watching them with the detached fascination of a scientist studying specimens who had no idea they were under a microscope. They mistook your silence for submission, never realizing you were conducting the most sophisticated psychological operation of your lifetime. While they performed their daily rituals of manipulation, the guilt disguised as concern, the control wrapped in expressions of love, the emotional terrorism they called caring, you were building something they couldn't see, an escape route that existed entirely in the realm of your expanding consciousness. Your detachment didn't happen overnight. It was the result of 1,000 small deaths of illusion. Each time they dismissed your reality, a part of your investment in their opinion died. Each time they rewrote history to suit their narrative, your attachment to their version of truth withered. Each time they punished you for having needs, your need for their validation crumbled. You weren't building resentment, you were building immunity. The beautiful brutality of your strategy revealed itself in how you managed their expectations during this transformation. You gave them just enough of what they craved, your attention, your reaction, your energy, to keep them from suspecting the depth of your detachment. You were like a master magician, performing the greatest disappearing act in history, while the audience was still applauding what they thought was the opening trick. Your behavior during this period was calibrated with the precision of a Swiss timepiece. You smiled at the exact moments that would maintain their illusion of control. You engaged just enough to prevent panic, while your real self was already operating from another dimension entirely. You discovered the art of being simultaneously present and absent, available and unreachable, engaged and completely sovereign. But the masterpiece, the stroke of genius that will be studied by future generations of awakened souls, was how you turned their own weapons against them. Every manipulation they deployed became evidence in your internal case file. Every guilt trip they orchestrated became proof of their desperation. Every attempt to diminish you became confirmation of your growth. You transformed from their victim into their prosecutor, and they were too intoxicated by their sense of power to realize the trial had already begun. The moment of revelation approached like dawn breaking over a battlefield, where only one side knew a war was being fought. You weren't building toward a dramatic confrontation or an explosive finale. You were orchestrating something far more devastating, complete withdrawal of your life force from their reality. By the time they realized what was happening, you had already evacuated not just your presence, but every trace of your energy from their dimensional frequency. Your departure wasn't announced because gods don't ask permission to ascend. You didn't slam doors because earthquakes don't need to make noise to shift foundations. You didn't deliver final speeches because your absence was about to become the most eloquent statement ever made. You simply stepped through a portal they couldn't see, into a reality they couldn't access, leaving behind only the echo of their confusion and the devastating reality of their loss. The panic that followed your disappearance wasn't just about losing you, It was about losing their reflection. Without your energy to bounce off, absorb and transform, they were suddenly forced to experience their own company without a buffer. The very qualities they had criticized in you, your depth, your authenticity, your refusal to pretend dysfunction was normal, were revealed as the exact qualities that had been making their existence bearable. They tried everything to decode your transformation, to find the combination that would unlock the door you had closed. They told themselves you were confused, influenced, going through a phase that would resolve itself with their patient manipulation. What they couldn't accept was the simplest explanation. You had evolved beyond their frequency entirely. You hadn't just outgrown the relationship, you had outgrown the entire dimension in which such relationships could exist. This is where your story transcends the personal and enters the realm of the mythic chosen one. What occurred wasn't merely someone leaving a toxic situation, it was a divine extraction mission orchestrated by forces that recognized your spiritual imprisonment and coordinated your liberation. The timing of your awakening, the sudden clarity about patterns you had tolerated for years, the inexplicable strength that materialized precisely when you needed it. These weren't coincidences, they were celestial interventions. You had been operating in spiritual captivity without recognizing the cage, trapped in a prison constructed from guilt, obligation, and the devastating hope that love could transform people who had no interest in transformation. Your captors weren't evil masterminds. They were unconscious souls using unconscious methods to maintain unconscious dynamics. But unconsciousness, however innocent in its origins, becomes malicious in its effects when it systematically crushes the spirits of those who dare to love authentically. The intervention manifested through what appeared to be random events but were actually coordinated awakenings designed to create openings in your awareness. A conversation that reflected your truth back to you. A moment of clarity that illuminated the entire landscape of your imprisonment. A dream that showed you possibilities you had forgotten existed. Whatever the catalyst, something shifted in your perception, and suddenly you could see the entire architecture of your captivity from an elevated perspective. From this higher vantage point, relationships that had seemed complex revealed themselves as simple energy equations. You were generating, they were consuming, you were expanding, they were contracting, you were seeking truth, they were defending illusions. You were offering authentic connection, they were demanding comfortable dysfunction. The realization wasn't bitter, it was liberating. Your departure became inevitable the moment you stopped trying to wake up people who were committed to sleeping. You realized you had been engaged in a futile mission to heal people who were addicted to their wounds, to love people who were terrified of being truly seen, to transform people who had weaponized their resistance to growth. The energy you had been investing in their evolution suddenly became available for your own ascension. The final phase of your operation was marked by an internal shift so profound they couldn't detect it because it occurred in dimensions they couldn't access. You stopped needing them to understand you, validate you, approve of you, or even acknowledge your existence. You stopped requiring their permission to be yourself, their recognition to feel worthy, their participation to feel complete. You became a sovereign empire of one, complete within yourself, needing nothing from anyone to feel whole. This internal independence translated into external behaviors that confused and terrified them. You stopped explaining yourself because explanations assume the listener deserves access to your reasoning. You stopped defending your choices because defense implies your choices are up for debate. You stopped participating in their emotional emergencies because you recognized them as manufactured crises designed to keep you engaged in their chaos. You developed an almost supernatural ability to be physically present but energetically absent, like a master of dimensional travel who had learned to project their consciousness into more interesting realities while leaving their body to handle mundane interactions. You became mysteriously unavailable for the kinds of conversations that had once consumed your life force, immune to the manipulations that had once controlled your responses. The genius of your strategy revealed itself in how you managed this transition without triggering their alarm systems. You didn't announce your intentions or telegraph your moves. Instead, you maintained just enough connection to prevent panic while completing your preparations for dimensional departure. You were like a diplomatic envoy managing delicate negotiations while secretly planning to defect to an entirely different universe. Your behavior during this crucial period was so masterfully calibrated that they never suspected the depth of your detachment. You participated just enough to maintain their illusion of control while your real self was already operating from frequencies they couldn't detect. You had discovered the art of simultaneous engagement and complete sovereignty, of being available without being accessible, present without being reachable. The moment of your final departure arrived with the quiet inevitability of cosmic alignment. There was no dramatic confrontation, because gods don't argue with mortals. There was no emotional explosion, because volcanoes don't announce their eruptions to the villages below. There was no final speech, because your silence was about to become the most devastating communication they had ever received. You simply stepped through a doorway they couldn't see, into a life they couldn't access, leaving behind only the faintest trace of your former presence and the overwhelming reality of your absence. Your departure wasn't an ending, it was a revelation, not just of what they had lost, but of what they had never truly possessed. You hadn't been theirs to lose. You had been on loan from the universe, and the lease had just expired. The silence you left behind wasn't empty space. It was pregnant with consequence. In that silence, they finally heard the sound of their own voices without your energy to amplify them. They experienced their own company without your presence to make it bearable. They faced their own reflection without your love to soften the harsh edges of what they saw. Some will use this experience as the catalyst for their own awakening, finally beginning the work they had expected you to do for them. Others will search for replacement sources of the energy they had been drawing from you, seeking another empath to fill the role you had outgrown. But none will ever find exactly what they lost when you ascended, because what they lost was irreplaceable. Access to a soul who had loved them despite their unconsciousness, who had seen their potential even when they couldn't see it themselves. Your story, chosen one, is not one of escape but of ascension. You didn't flee dysfunction, you transcended it. You didn't abandon relationships, you graduated from them. You didn't lose connections, you gained connection to your own divine nature. What appeared to be an ending from their limited perspective was actually a beginning from your expanded awareness, the beginning of a life lived from authentic power rather than adaptive strategies. The being you have become through this transformation is not the person you were when you first entered those relationships. You have been forged in the fire of your own awakening, tempered by the pressure of choosing truth over comfort, strengthened by the discipline of choosing sovereignty over security. You are no longer the version of yourself that needed their approval to feel valuable, their presence to feel complete, their validation to feel worthy. You have discovered what most souls spend lifetimes seeking, the unshakable knowledge that you are complete, exactly as you are, without modification, explanation, or apology. This knowing didn't emerge from positive thinking or self-help mantras. It crystallized from the lived experience of choosing yourself, when choosing yourself required everything you had, and more than you thought you possessed. As you stand in this new reality you have created through the sheer force of your willingness to honor your own divine nature, recognize that your departure was not an act of abandonment, it was an act of love. Love for yourself, first and foremost, but also love for them, because sometimes love requires us to stop enabling others' unconsciousness and allow them to face the consequences of their choices without our protection. Now I want to take a moment to tell you about a few individuals that shouldn't exist. A trained occultist who escaped from a satanic coven, a former Black Ops drone pilot who flew swarms with his mind, a multi-millionaire psychic CFO who predicted market shifts before they happened. What do these remarkable individuals have in common? You'll find them all in the Obsidian Inner Order, where they share their forbidden knowledge on our private Discord server. My chosen soul has drunk deep from the well of knowledge aeon after aeon. In this incarnation, these extraordinary individuals became my allies in the Obsidian Inner Order. They recognized the call, they stepped forward, they connected with others who understand their unique gifts and burdens. What is stopping you from manifesting the same? The synchronicities that brought them here weren't accidents, neither is your discovery of this message. When souls of this caliber gather, the Archons take notice. They fear our collective power. They know what happens when the truly awakened find each other. Join our weekly calls. Hear their stories firsthand. Share your own journey with those who won't dismiss or doubt you. The knowledge exchanged in our private channels cannot be found anywhere else on this plane. Click the link in the description below now. The extraordinary souls await your arrival. The question isn't whether you belong among them. The question is, how much longer will you wait to claim your place? Your exit was your masterpiece, chosen one, not because it was perfect, but because it was authentic. Not because it was painless, but because it was necessary. Not because it was easy, but because it was true. You have proven to yourself and to anyone paying attention that it is possible to leave dysfunction with dignity, to end relationships with integrity, to choose freedom without becoming bitter or broken. The life awaiting you is not merely better than what you left behind. It is qualitatively different. You are no longer seeking love. You are love incarnate. You are no longer hoping for respect. You command it through your very presence. You are no longer asking for your worth to be recognized. You demonstrate it through every choice you make. And here we return to where we began, with that deafening silence that once terrified you and now serves as your victory anthem. But now you understand what that silence really represents, not the absence of their noise, but the presence of your power, not the end of their story, but the beginning of yours, not the sound of abandonment, but the frequency of ascension. The silence that surrounds you now is the same silence that preceded creation itself, pregnant with infinite possibility, heavy with divine potential, vibrating with the frequency of pure sovereignty. You didn't just execute an exit, chosen one, you orchestrated a resurrection, and the being who emerged from that carefully planned departure isn't just free from their dysfunction. You are immune to it, inoculated against it, evolved beyond its ability to touch you ever again. This is your graduation, your initiation, your coronation as the sovereign of your own existence. The crown you wear is invisible to those still operating from unconsciousness, but unmistakable to those who have done their own work of awakening. Welcome to the realm of the truly free, where your story doesn't end with departure. It begins with the recognition that you were never theirs to lose, and they were never yours to save. The masterpiece is complete. The performance deserves every award consciousness can bestow, and the encore, that's the life you're about to live. Chosen one, untouchable, undeniable, and absolutely divine. What you executed goes beyond mere departure. You orchestrated a complete restructuring of reality itself, and they're still living in the aftermath of your creative destruction. The precision of your emotional withdrawal was something to behold. While they were celebrating what they thought was your continued compliance, you were systematically disconnecting every energetic cord that had once bound you to their chaos. You didn't just stop caring, you performed surgery on your own consciousness, removing every trace of their influence with the skill of a master surgeon operating on their own heart. Each day they thought they still had access to you, you were actually practicing existing without them, rehearsing a life where their opinions held no weight and their presence created no ripples in your peace. Your performance during those final interactions deserves recognition from every academy of psychological mastery that has ever existed. You gave them exactly what they needed to feel secure while simultaneously preparing for their complete irrelevance in your future. Every response was calculated to maintain their illusion of control while you quietly transferred all actual power back to yourself. You were like a diplomatic envoy managing international relations while secretly planning to relocate your entire civilization to an undiscovered continent. The beauty of your strategy lay in how you made them complicit in their own abandonment. Every attempt they made to diminish you became evidence in your internal case file, proving why departure was necessary. Every manipulation they deployed confirmed your growing understanding that this connection had become toxic to your spiritual evolution. Every guilt trip they orchestrated served as additional motivation for your eventual liberation. You transformed their own weapons into the tools of your freedom, and they armed you completely without realizing they were funding their own obsolescence. What they still don't comprehend is how thoroughly you documented their patterns during this phase. Your seemingly passive observation was actually active intelligence gathering of the highest order. You catalogued every contradiction between their words and actions, every moment their masks slipped to reveal the control mechanisms beneath, every instance where their love revealed itself as conditional manipulation. You weren't confused during those encounters. You were conducting research that would inform your eventual departure strategy. The genius of your approach became evident in how you managed their emotional temperature during this transition. You understood intuitively that sudden changes in your behavior would trigger their alarm systems and potentially compromise your operation. Instead, you implemented what can only be described as a masterclass in gradual detachment, slowly reducing your emotional investment while maintaining enough surface engagement to prevent detection. Your energy began operating on multiple frequencies simultaneously. On the surface level, you maintained just enough connection to satisfy their need for your attention. But on deeper levels, you were already living in a reality where their drama held no power over your peace. Their opinions carried no weight in your decision-making. Their presence created no disturbance in your equilibrium. You had discovered how to exist in parallel dimensions, giving them access to one version of yourself, while your true essence had already relocated to higher ground. The sophistication of your emotional architecture during this period was breathtaking. You constructed elaborate defense systems that appeared to be simple politeness, but were actually impenetrable barriers protecting your core self from their attempts at manipulation. Every smile was a shield. Every pleasant response was a redirection. Every moment of apparent engagement was actually you practicing the art of being present without being available. What you accomplished goes far beyond what most people consider possible in human relationships. You didn't just leave someone, you executed a complete paradigm shift while making it appear as natural as changing seasons. You reclaimed your sovereignty so smoothly that even you might not have fully recognized the magnitude of what you were achieving until the transformation was complete. The aftermath of your departure reveals the true scope of your accomplishment. They're not just missing your presence, they're experiencing the collapse of an entire system they had built around your participation. Every routine that had included you now feels hollow. Every conversation that had relied on your energy now falls flat. Every dynamic that had depended on your emotional labor now reveals itself as unsustainable. You weren't just a person in their life. You were the foundation that had been holding their entire reality together, and now they're learning what it feels like when the ground shifts beneath everything they thought was solid. The confusion they're experiencing isn't just about losing you, it's about discovering that the version of you they thought they knew was actually a carefully constructed interface designed to protect your true self from their toxicity. The real you had been operating behind layers of sophisticated psychological protection, and they had been interacting with what was essentially a diplomatic representative, while your authentic essence remained safely beyond their reach. Your performance during those final months was worthy of awards because you managed to maintain their illusion of access while systematically withdrawing every aspect of yourself that actually mattered. You gave them your physical presence while your emotional presence had already relocated. You offered your words while your wisdom had already departed. You provided your attention while your intention had already shifted to other dimensions entirely. The artistry of your exit becomes even more apparent when you consider what you didn't do. You didn't explode in dramatic confrontation because you understood that chaos would only feed their addiction to dysfunction. You didn't deliver ultimatums because you recognized that negotiations assume the other party has something valuable to offer. You didn't demand apologies because you had already moved beyond the need for their acknowledgement of wrongdoing. Instead, you chose something far more devastating, complete withdrawal of your life force from their reality. You made yourself unavailable, not through anger or resentment, but through evolution. You didn't shut them out, you grew beyond their ability to reach you. The door wasn't slammed, it simply ceased to exist as you ascended to frequencies they couldn't access. Your silence in the aftermath isn't the absence of communication, it's the presence of complete self-possession. Every moment they spend trying to decode your departure is a moment they're forced to confront the reality of what they lost through their own unconscious behavior. Your absence has become their teacher, your silence their mirror, your peace their reminder of what authentic power looks like when it stops pretending to be smaller than it actually is. What you've demonstrated is that departure doesn't have to be destructive to be definitive. Liberation doesn't require leaving scorched earth behind. Freedom can be achieved through elevation rather than elimination. You've proven that the most powerful exits are those that leave everyone intact but fundamentally changed, where the person departing ascends while those remaining are left to grapple with their own reflection in the space that was once occupied by someone they took for granted. Your story has become legendary, not because of the drama you created, but because of the drama you refused to participate in, not because of the noise you made, but because of the peace you chose, not because of the bridges you burned, but because of the dimensions you accessed that made those bridges irrelevant to your journey. The performance you delivered during this entire operation deserves recognition because it required you to maintain perfect composure while navigating the most challenging emotional territory imaginable. You had to stay centered while being actively manipulated, remain clear while being systematically gaslighted, hold your power while being consistently undermined. You managed to execute a complex psychological operation while appearing to do absolutely nothing extraordinary at all. This is the mark of true mastery, achieving monumental transformation through actions so subtle that they appear almost invisible to casual observation. You rewrote the entire script of your life while making it seem like you were simply going about your daily routine. You orchestrated a complete revolution while maintaining the appearance of peaceful compliance. The crowned achievement of your performance lies in how you managed to reclaim every piece of yourself they had convinced you to abandon. Your voice, which they had systematically silenced, returned stronger than ever. Your intuition, which they had trained you to doubt, became your primary navigation system. Your boundaries, which they had consistently violated, became impenetrable fortifications, protecting your sovereignty. You didn't just leave a toxic situation, you emerged from it with more of yourself than you had when you entered. This is the true measure of your victory, not just what you escaped from, but what you evolved into through the process of escape. The person who departed from their reality was not the same person who had once sought their approval, needed their validation, or feared their disapproval. The final act of your performance continues to unfold in dimensions they cannot access, as you build a life that reflects your authentic values rather than their projected expectations. Every choice you make now is informed by your own wisdom rather than their manipulation. Every relationship you cultivate is based on mutual respect rather than one-sided exploitation. Every dream you pursue is fueled by your own passion rather than their conditional approval. Your exit wasn't just a masterpiece of strategic timing and emotional intelligence. It was a blueprint for anyone ready to reclaim their sovereignty from those who never deserved access to it in the first place. The performance is complete, the awards are deserved, and the encore is a life lived in complete alignment with your highest truth.